Good morning. Welcome to Satan and Coffee. I hope everyone is doing well. My mic is fuck always for some fucking reason. That could be why. There we go. I don't know why it does that, but it lowers my mic down 35%. Start my PC. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satan and Coffee. I hope I am what are you owed? In my opinion, but just giving you shit. Mystic, how's it going? Maeve, how's it going? Disciple, how's it going? Good to see everybody. So this morning, what we're going to be talking about, something a little bit more generalized. Stuff it. I just stuffed my morning Ritalin and vitamins into my face, so those are going to kick in about 20. All the Ritalin is at least. How's it going? Good morning. So this morning we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than we normally talk. And we're going to be talking about what is a personal pantheon, right? Or at least building a personal pantheon, right? And I think it's an important subject to talk about because, I mean, it's kind of where we're at. You know, traditional are very rarely followed to the letter anymore, which I think is kind of sad. I think it's kind of sad that, like many people, regardless of pantheon, Norse paganism, Egyptian pantheon, whatever, it's very rarely only that, right? It's very rarely only that belief. And maybe that's, the bit of the Hollywood, movie obsessed part of myself that's kind of sad to see that, nobody is following a traditional old school pantheon like 100% away. And because it's always so mystical and amazing, right? In movies, like when, somebody finds out that somebody's a witch or something and that they follow this one thing and they're super powerful because of this one thing. But we know the reality of the situation is that it doesn't work this way. Also, in other news, super fucking excited for Henry Cavill as the fucking Highlander. And who else in the chat is old enough to know who the fuck or what the fuck Highlander is? Please tell me. I'm like, at least Maeve, please tell me you know Highlander. There can only be one Highlander. Super fucking excited for that. I own the OG. Fuck yeah, man. Fuck yeah. Well, I'm excited. I think because of Cavill's performance in The Witcher, I remember watching The Witcher, but he'd make a really good Highlander. And they're making it happen. They're doing it. So I'm super excited for that. And there is a kind of teaser trailer kind of thing out that can be watched for. Super fucking excited for that. I showed it to Dyra and she's like, why does it look like it happens in like 15 different timelines? I was like, because it does. Because it does. I mean, honestly, I don't think anything is going to replace like the early 90s, late 80s. Like, I don't give a fuck productions. Just to be honest, right? There's just something about movies like that from like the 80s and 90s that's just like, we just didn't care, right? Like, it was just fucking, like, gratuitous violence was gratuitous fucking violence. Yeah, it was definitely fun to watch back in the day. I mean, back in the day, it was a TV show, wasn't it? Like, if I remember correctly, it was a TV show. It wasn't. I think there was a couple of movies, but it was folk. Primarily, it was a TV show. Yeah. And movies. Yeah. So, but back then, like, nobody gave a shit back then, though. Like, it was just so, like, like, you watch that shit and you're like, oh. So I'm really hoping that they keep true with that, right? It's why I don't think, like, Conan the Barbarian would be good if they tried to redo it, right? First and foremost, Conan the Barbarian sounds like a fucking, like, kids show. But if you've ever watched Conan the Barbarian, it is anything but a kid's show. You do not want your kids watching Arnold Schwarzenegger as Conan the Barbarian. Yeah, those were out there. Like, it was like, they asked the showrunner, it's like, well, what do you want in the show? Do you want sex, violence, lack of a storyline? And they just went, yes. That's fucking crazy. Oh, the way we made movies back then. We're too afraid to make movies like that anymore, sadly. Anyway, on to the subject. I do kind of like, see, with Apocrypha, we've got an opening tarot read. With Satan and Coffee, we have, just regular cultural going-ons. So, personal pantheon. As always, what we're going to do, starting this out, is we have to define what the fuck a personal pantheon is. Okay? So, what is a personal pantheon? A personal pantheon is a curated set of entities, right? Forces and archetypes a practitioner works with consistently. Right? So that's the base level of what personal pantheon is. It creates continuity, structure, and spiritual identity. It differs from the traditional religious pantheon, which is inherited. This one is chosen. Each figure serves a purpose: empowerment, shadow integration, wisdom, initiation, protection, etc. Right? The pantheon is not a shelf full of names. It is a living ecosystem of meaning. Every being, every archetype, every daemon in your circle should have a function. If something sits there doing nothing, you don't have a pantheon, you have spiritual clutter, right? So, why does intentional selection matter? Because there are elements to pantheons that we don't pay attention to, that we don't look at, right? So for me, we break it down, right? Lucifer is, for me, kind of like the illumination aspect of things, kind of shows, or rather guides, through new paths, new directions, missing parts of myself. Belial works in the grounding aspect of wake the fuck up and get your ass moving. I think Belial is the most aggressive part of my personal pantheon. There is Payman. King Payman is definitely part of my repertoire of my personal pantheon, as I'm artistic, creative, and whatnot. And, the combination of Lucifer and King Payman definitely, pushes that forth. And then Lilith, I needed to include, feminine archetype into my pantheon. For Lilith, for me, is the forceful aspect of it. I would say that for me, Lilith's energy is very much like Belial's energy, just in feminine form. And it's also to deal with trauma, right? To deal with events to reconcile my past is where Lilith kind of sits for me. And then obviously, right, the biggest one, Baphomet, integration. Baphomet for me is balance and integration of all of the former. Right, so there are some others that I work with on occasion. Pazuzu is definitely in there, just as of late. Couldn't give you exactly what, if Pazuzu is going to be a staple or not. I think it's okay in a personal pantheon to introduce new members into the pantheon and see if they work well with you, and then, you know, maybe do kind of like, you know, offering schedule or so, and then kind of rotate in or rotate out until you find others that work for you. Lucifer definitely never used to be primary staple in my pantheon. I think within the last year or 2 years, Lucifer's definitely become more and more prominent in my pantheon. And I think if I were to pick a head of my pantheon, if you were to ask me 3 years ago, I would say it would just be Baphomet. But I definitely feel and believe that, you know, for me currently, there are two heads to my pantheon. That's, you know, Lucifer and Baphomet. Like both of them, you know, together have equal footing in my pantheon. So that's the intention, right? And why intentional selection matters. And as practitioners, we can outgrow certain entities. Or rather, you know, a cycle finishes, right? I don't think it is good for us to try to force ourselves to stay connected the same way to all our entities, all the entities that we work with. Baphomet was definitely a focus for many years, 100%. And that situation bore, you know, much fruit. But there came a point, quite literally, I would say about 5 years ago, after starting writing the book, that which we're waiting for Unexplained Possibilities to do the review on. Very nervous about that review because I kind of switched up the direction of the book quite a bit. So just wondering if, you know, it's better or now complete shit. But anyway, you know, I think at that point, I think that was kind of like, for me with Baphomet, the pinnacle of kind of like that personal exploration, right? It's kind of like, it's not that Baphomet's is less in my practice. Baphomet's definitely there. But it's to understand that Baphomet, like I've always said, isn't an entity that you go to and that you ask for shit, right? You're not like going to doing a ritual to Baphomet and being like, you know, I want a new job, I want a car, I want this, I want that, I want the next thing, because you're going to get ignored. It's not even that you're not going to get it. I mean, you're not going to get it, you know, at least through Baphomet, and Baphomet's just going to probably scoff, shrug his shoulders and fucking walk away. You know, there's an communication there, right? Of dedication that you have to go through, years and years of dedication, which I did. And still do. It just, I wouldn't say that Baphomet is, you know, like a daily ritual focus, right? Definitely multiple times a week, but not a daily, like it to be. And most of the time, like I'm exploring, you know, one of the bigger things as myself. Right? I'm exploring that energy in a way that I think that most people don't teach you to do. And I think, you know, once the Baphomet book is out, I think the next book is going to be that. Is going to be talking about personal power, and using your entities as archetypes in a more theoretical and metaphorical sense rather than a literal sense, right? That embodying aspects of the entities in your pantheon, and then using that to focus in on your own power, your own ability, and then owning and harnessing that. So, and pantheons in many ways are mirrors of psychological evolution, right? So the things that you worked with as a kid, or the things that excited you as a child, teenager, as an adolescent, as a young adult, may not be the things that place you and excite you, today. I remember as a kid, as a young, adolescent, I would, anything that looked dark, I would eat it up. The Satanic Bible, the Necronomicon, all these things. I would only really look at books like books on Wicca for like stuff, right? So because back then, today is very different, but back then, it was usually only the books on more lighthearted magic that, spoke about, hexing and cursing and things of that nature, usually in a very negative sense, and gave kind of like the correspondence tables and the tools that you would use and the altar setup. And I don't remember the book, but I remember one of the books that I read as an adolescent. I can still see the image in my head. It was a very crude illustration of, the setup of an altar, with the pentagram on the table and where to put Athame and the bosom and all of this stuff. And, it's very much, that stuck with me. And that's very much the dynamic of, my altar today, and has been for a very long time. So it's just kind of one of those things, right? But I do believe that as we evolve, so does our practice. And I think that that's okay. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, if you want to include it into my pantheon as well, you can look at Odin, Thor. I mean, those are kind of regulars, in my pantheon, but in a very different way, right? A pantheon doesn't inherently necessarily mean like entities that you do ritual to or for or in light of, but ideals that you want to embody. I mean, there's a reason I wear Mjolnir. Like I have had this Mjolnir on my neck for the last 8 years. Like it's not come off. I bathe in this fucking thing. And I mean, I had changed the pendant at one point for a couple of weeks, but I didn't like it. Actually, it's up here in my thing. I'm not going to go through it because there's too much shit in there. But I mean, I do like it. It's just way too heavy. It's way too heavy. And there's just something about this one that I just really, really like. I don't know if I find a thicker, heavier, black chain, black iodized chain, then, I might do two of them. But, for the time being, it's just this one. But essentially, it hasn't come off for like 8 years. And it's not that I do ritual to, with Thor, but it's more of a representation to me of values of my life. That is definitely intertwined with my spirituality, my principles, my ideals, my, the way that I choose that I want to live my life, and I want things to be for myself, that I want to be the type of person that I want to be. That is, very much, part of my pantheon. And the Christians try to embody everything with one being, or at least they claim for it to be one being. But there's a reason why within Christianity there exists saints and angels and all of these things that they're polytheists without ever actually admitting it, because they call one entity God, and their definition of God something that is all powerful. We as occultists know differently, don't we? We know that isn't the case. That gods are not all powerful, not omniscient all the time. They're not always paying attention. Sometimes they don't give a shit. And, the amount of people that you see with crosses, and then also, saint pendants, for, different types of saints. I think some of the more famous ones, like Saint Jude and some shit like that. Like I'm unfamiliar. Whatever one is the patron saint for lost causes, like I see a lot of people with that one for lost causes. That's funny. But we need to find balance and aspects we want to improve. It is why we should surround ourselves with examples of what we wish to strive for. We keep matters. Exactly. And I believe that in your pantheon, that is company that you keep. I 100% agree with that. Deduction, Maeve. It's one of the reasons why, when I decided on what type of metaphysical, magical symbolism I wanted in my work area, I have baby Baphomet with a broken fire on his head. I don't know how it broke, but chipped. And I have the traditional sigil of Baphomet, which is Samael Lilith. Because inside of the concept of Lucifer, like I've discussed a million times, in my work with Lucifer, I don't just work with Lucifer or that aspect of Lucifer, the Luciferian aspect of Lucifer, but I also work with Samael and Satan, right? Satan, title-made entity. And those are also staples in my pantheon. I guess Lucifer would be kind of my equivalent of the triple goddess, right? The maiden, the mother, and the crone, right? So if you're to break it down, the maiden would be Samael, the mother would be Lucifer, and the crone would be Satan. That's how I would break it down, like as an analogy. And it's not to say that, I'm calling Lucifer, you get what I'm saying. So now what about the psychological foundations of a personal pantheon, right? I believe that Jungian archetypes are the backbone of pantheon work. I believe that the pantheon is symbolic to internal architecture, your structure. And I think that entities often represent complexes, instincts, and roles, right? The pantheon stabilizes our identity by dividing psychic labor, right? So when we speak of gods, demons, or spirits, we are also speaking of patterns, ancient, powerful, and deeply embedded in the human psyche. A pantheon functions like a council of inner forces, right? When you choose the members, you are choosing the parts of yourself to amplify, right? And I do, I know that traditionally you're not supposed to, work with, multiple entities at the same time, but I've done that often, where I do treat them like a council. I think that is like a good analogy. Like I do treat, the entities that I work with almost like a spiritual council. And, I have, called on that council as a group, great many times, the information that comes through is usually very jumbled, but good information does come through, right? And so I don't think that it's something that people should inherently avoid. I don't think it's disrespectful. Depending on how you approach it, right? If like you approach it like, a certain way, like I think you can approach it respectfully, right? And then obviously we need to identify like our dominant archetypes, right? So how the unconscious chooses before you consciously do, in the sense that usually you feel drawn to something, right? Like when we begin our pantheon work, as adolescents and as adults and things like that, we begin to feel drawn towards something, right? Like I know payment was something that like was an experience for me, because before I started working with payment would pop up everywhere. I wouldn't work with payment. It's been, only a few years that I've been working with payment, but I didn't have any really interest, like, because I was so dedicated and ingrained into Medic, what I would consider what I call Baphometic tradition. And the thing is payment just kind of kept popping up, right? And then I started working with it, and lo and behold, payments stopped popping up. So, it very interesting. We become drawn to stuff, it to us, and we need to listen to that, right? And look at each entity that you're working with, right? What does that entity reflect? Is it shadow material or aspiration, right? What are we looking at there? So the next part we're going to talk about here is the mythic and historical roots of pantheon building, right? So like, how does this play out? Is this just a modern thing? Is it something that's existed for a while, right? So humans traditionally formed pantheons to map the world, right? So to explain things in life that didn't have explanation, right? You look at Norse paganism, for example, Thor is the god of thunder, right? Or if you look at the Greek pantheon, Aphrodite is the goddess of love, Ares is the god of war. Each aspect of human existence, a god or a deity or an entity that loomed over it, right? In Norse paganism, war would be, Odin, right? If there's a crow on the battlefield, Odin would be present, which is kind of funny because there would always be a crow on a battlefield when there's dead bodies, because crows are scavengers. So, there's a bunch of dead people. There's going to be buzzards. Buzzards. I think they're buzzards and crows. So the scavengers, right? So is it a buzzard? Is that right? I feel like that's what it is, but I can't remember. So left-hand path practitioners, specifically here, right, form pantheons to the map of self, right? So where human beings traditionally create pantheons to explore and map the world, us on the left-hand path, generally what we do is we create a pantheon to map ourselves, to understand better who it is that we are and why it is we do what we do, and to elicit change, right? Like a lot of the times, I think the big thing here is a lot of us don't talk about this side of it very often. When we're building our pantheon, we build it to map ourselves, but also because we want to change ourselves. That's a huge aspect of like who we are. As practitioners, as occult practitioners on the left-hand path, is we want to elicit change. We want to become better. Whatever that version of ourselves that we want to become, we want to embody it isn't just because we want to understand who we are, but it's because we want to change who we are. We want to become a better version of ourselves. Right. So when we begin work, we don't begin work with Belial or Lucifer or something like that because we think we're great, wonderful fucking people. We're absolute perfection. We don't need to change anything. You know, spirituality in general is because, you know, we understand ourselves to be spiritual creatures and we want to embody, you know, that spirituality and we want to become better. We want to improve, right? We want change. The only difference, I think, between like, you know, traditional occult practice, something like Wicca and stuff like that, or many other, you know, books that I've read, is that we're not looking, it's not only about power, is it? The power is in the ability to change the self, to become a better version of yourself. It's not just about practicing magic and manipulating the world around you. It's not just that. And I think that that's the only part that a lot of people talk about. I think one of the bigger aspects that most of us for some reason ignore you know, because it's not as romanticized as, you know, the, you know, affecting change externally, is affecting change internally, is changing those parts of ourselves that we want to change, that we want to improve, becoming more, becoming better, becoming stronger, becoming more patient, becoming, you know, all of these things, you know, is a huge aspect of practice, right? Because it's even like ancestor work. Like we talk about ancestor work, right? But what do you do? What do you do with your ancestor work, right? You don't just sit there, hang out, and have a fucking conversation, right? We ancestor work has a very specific, you know, mapped outcome. Ancestor work is where we are looking for, you know, that mother, father, grandmother, grandfather kind of motif, you know, with ancestor work, and that's the place to get it, right? I'm not gonna lie, like you know, the other night, you know, I did a ritual, you know, embodying Lucifer. And then right after that, you know, I called on my dad. Yeah, I called him out. Like, you know, I'm like, you know, talk to me. Tell me something. You know, like, am I doing the right thing here? You know, am I on like a solid path, or am I just wasting my time? You know, and it worked. You know, my dad came through. He always does, right? And for me, it was because I needed that kick in the ass. That's what it was for, right? It wasn't because, you know, I just wanted to hang out and say hi, or how's it going, or, you know, stuff. No, it was because I needed something, right? And I think the biggest thing that we need when we build out these pantheons, and we don't talk about it enough, because again, it's not, you know, popularized, it's not romanticized, right? Because when we look at Hollywood, Hollywood is romanticized, you know, the external manifestation of power and control and manipulation, though those are the aspects that are, you know, popularized. That's the part that's put out there, you know, and the light shined upon that part of it. And I think that part is, you know, been overly exposed and exaggerated and beaten to death, you know, multiple times. The part that never gets spoken about is that part of the personal self, the personal self-improvement. That's the part that's, you know, not spoken about. And that's the primary focus when we do this shit. That's the primary focus. Is that personal self-improvement, becoming better versions of ourselves, growing, shedding old skin, and allowing ourselves the transcendence, and the metamorphosis of change. We want to be better. That's why we do this. That's why we are spiritual. That's why the atheist believes what they believe. It's not that, the atheistic pantheon, right, is, void of personal, improvement. I think that they're the ones that probably focus more on self-improvement. So much so that, the atheistic Satanist has become the dark, spooky Catholic, right? There is no atheistic Satanism. But it's only because they're so deeply focused on, personal self-improvement that they've just become dicks. But yeah. So every culture used pantheons as organizational tools. Egyptian, Greek, Mesopotamian, Nordic, Mesoamerican, right? They've all used their pantheons as organizational tools to organize the world, right? To understand the world. Like there was, an understanding of the world around them through their pantheon. Daemonic and adversarial pantheons appear across history as counterforce systems, not just evil gods, right? So dialectism works differently in the LHP is because we're not trying to map out the world, especially in modern, like, left-hand path practice. Like, I think left-hand path practice has always existed. It just hasn't always been called left-hand path. And so the eclecticism, fucking hell, man. So somebody actually left a comment on one of my videos. I hope you're mispronouncing those intentionally. Fuck off. Go fuck yourself. No, I'm not mispronouncing shit intentionally, dumbass. Right? Yeah, I have very severe ADHD, and unfortunately that ADHD also gives me fucking dyslexia, which is very prominent in a lot of my writing. And, it causes an issue when I look at fucking words, because guess what? At the end of the fucking day, English is not pronounced how it is written. It's not like Spanish. En español, hablas como escribes y escribes como hablas. Así de fácil. Y en este sentido, español es mucho más fácil para hablar y escribir. ¿Por qué? Porque lo escribes exactamente de la misma manera que lo hables. Y tan tan. English is not like that. English is not written how you speak it, and it's not spoken how it's written. So, yeah, I have a hard time with a lot of words. So no, I don't mispronounce shit intentionally, jackass. Right? But like everybody thinks that they got the, like, when they don't have an argumentative point to, like, what you're talking about spiritually, right? When you're talking about this stuff, right? They think they can't come up with something to argue about, or that they disagree with you. They just don't like you, and so they want to point something out. If you misspell a word, if you use the wrong there, if you use the whatever, the wrong word, the wrong spelling, you say something wrong, they start attacking it like it's a character flaw. Right? Like, oh, you can't do it, you're an idiot. Shut the fuck up and go back onto your rock. Right? At least I'm doing something, right? At least I'm creating something. At least I'm putting something out into the world, right? I'm making the world a better place, right? By putting the content out there, by giving people something. What are you doing? What? Nothing. You're nothing. You are nothing. You are less than fucking nothing. right? You have done nothing. You are doing nothing, right? So you come onto somebody's video, somebody's comments, stuff like that, and try to make them feel bad about who they are, right? Because they made a few mistakes, right? So you can feel better about yourself. And the only thing that that shows is how absolutely and utterly fucking worthless you feel about yourself. Internalized, unresolved trauma. Get a shrink. That on my comment section. Anyway, that was a rant. Which deity can show you something different than... You mean me personally? Or you asking for yourself, disciple? Like, you tell me that and I'll throw something at you. Well, I'll start with myself, right? Like if you're talking about for you, then I'll answer that, but I'll answer for myself first. So what deity has shown me something different that has made them special? First and foremost, honestly, all of them. But the easiest one to pick would be Baphomet. And I think the reason why Baphomet stays on the top of that list is because one of the things that I learned with Baphomet before I understood like Jungian psychology and all of that stuff and like its role that it played, right, is it's almost like knowing English, right? So as Americans and apparently most Brits as well, like there are certain grammatical tenses. So there are 12 tenses in the English language. We're aware of 3 of them, right? Past, present, and future. But inside of that, you have simple past and present perfect and present continuous and present perfect continuous and all of this stuff. And those are all tenses. So there's about 12 tenses in the English language. We're aware of 3 of them, but we use all 12 all the time, right? So, and there's a point to this. So we can use something all the time and use it perfectly without knowing what it is. Right? It is such a true statement. And like being an English teacher for as long as I was, it's almost 16 years. ESL, by the way, English is a second language. When I first started learning to teach, like I didn't realize that, there are so many tenses in the English language. But I use them all the time. And with Baphomet, there were things that I was learning that I needed to do that I didn't know what it was called until I started learning kind of more like, the left-hand path part of things and, the tie-in with Jungian psychology and the depth of it. And then Scarlet definitely, Hale Scarlet, Scarlet Bales and Nate Bales. Those guys are fucking amazing. And they are so because, with them, I learned what my path was teaching me the whole time with Baphomet and the whole idea of balance and stuff like that. You can't have balance without integration. And so to say what entity or deity have I worked with or do I work with that, is, of importance and why they're of importance is because Baphomet, before I even knew what integration with my shadow was, in the psychological sense, I was practicing that spiritually. Right? Baphomet from the very get, came to me at a time where I needed to understand to integrate things that were happening to me. Right? Things that, at the time I didn't cause them to happen. I didn't ask for them to happen. They weren't my fault. They did happen to me, but, for the longest time, I lived in, hatred of the world. I did. I hated everyone. Like, even though, I wasn't consciously aware of it. I was just angry at the world. I was angry at everything. I was angry all the time. And, you know, that came through in a lot of different ways. And what Baphomet definitely did, you know, the work that I've done with Baphomet is help with balancing that and integrating it, because you can't balance those parts without integrating them into yourself and saying, this is a part of me. And so I understood very early on through my work with Baphomet that things that have happened to me are mine. My trauma is mine. I own it. I didn't cause it. I didn't ask for it. I'm not to blame for it. But, you know, 1 second. Sorry, the mother-in-law is coming today, so we're in regular communication, right? We're triangulating her location. So, you know, there are definitely a lot of things that you know I needed to do for myself that Baphomet helped me with. Now, once I learned what something was and how to properly do it, then I was able to do it on such a deeper level that, you know, it helped me quite a bit. You know, though my sessions with Scarlett, you know, as my therapist were few and far between, you know, one of the reasons I recommend Scarlett so much is because I know I'm a horrible patient. Like, she asked me to do the polyvagal stuff. I don't know how many times to this day I haven't done it. But you know, I don't know if she knows how much she actually helped me understand certain things. And, you know, integrating into my pantheon and my work with, 1 second, sorry. More of the mother-in-law stuff. 1 second, guys. You know, integrating, you know, talking with Scarlett helped me understand what that integration was, what that work with Baphomet was doing, and how it worked on a psychological level. So I don't know if she realizes how much she actually helped me in the few sessions that we had, but she helped me tremendously. And I would love to, you know, continue sessions with her. But one, I'm not in the States, and license-wise, she can't. And two, I don't have insurance, and I cannot pay $300 an hour. She is totally worth it. Totally worth the $300 an hour. I can't afford that. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, you don't need to know what something is to take advantage of it, right? And teaching English has taught me that. We don't know all the 12 tenses of English, but we use them every day. We're aware of 3, and in, you know, before Scarlett and that work, right? I would say that, you know, I was aware of, you know, the 3 tenses, though I was using 12. And once I understood what those 12 were, then I kind of understood better where and when to use it, right? Or how to apply it. Like talking about like what it is that we're talking about, right? I was able to apply that integration and that balance in a more clean way. Right. So it's not to say never learn, but it's to say that you're probably practicing something without realizing you're practicing it. Right. And if you can identify what that is, then I think that you can provide more in better, you know, control to what it is that you're applying. So when you understand the old gods, you understand why pantheons exist in the first place. They explain forces, They explain change. They explain the human condition. Your personal pantheon will do the same, but for your own evolution. And that is the part, again, that most of us don't talk about, is our own personal evolution, our own personal experience and growth inside of these things, right? So choosing your pantheon members. So the key, this is by no means rule, thumb, or a law or something that you need to follow to the letter, but this is the best thing that I've kind of come up with, like when you're trying to figure out like what your pantheon is, or you're choosing your council, right? Like, and we're going to call it that for argument's sake. When you're choosing your council, these are the things that I feel like I indirectly paid attention to as I was doing it. And you know, I just kind of made this list for it. Excuse me. So the key evaluation points, I think, would be, does the entity resonate with your goals, right? Is what your goals are. Does the entity resonate with that? Does working with them produce consistent results? Consistent results are important. And again, with this conversation, I don't want us to focus on external results. Sometimes the results are internal. Like when we talk about results, this is the thing, and I think LaVey understood this better than most, is that most people, when we talk about results, most people immediately get this image of people falling in love with each other or hating each other or getting into car accidents or whatever because, you know, oh, we cursed them or we did this. Consistent results, when we talk about consistent results, the most consistent results that you're going to get are going to be internal results. Right? It just is what it is, right? So one second. So when we talk about consistent results aren't just like external visible results, but results that are internal to yourself, right? And that's where most of our results happen, which is why I think the conversation of, you know, the personal empowerment, the personal betterment, the personal kind of like growth with what we're doing spiritually is an important conversation to have, and not just to focus on the outside parts. Because like, you think about it, like watch any video about any god, any demon, anything, right? And what's the first thing that people talk about? The first thing people talk about is what you use them for externally to yourself. Okay? That is what happens, right? So we look at like, you know, these gods and these demons and all of these things, and we think, okay, what can we achieve in life with these things? And, you know, what do we hear? Money spells, love spells, rituals for, you know, breaking somebody up, making an ex come back, finding something that's lost, right? And we think about all of these things externally from ourselves. Finding something that's lost, for example. Does it always have to be your keys? Does it have to be a person that broke up with you? Somebody breaks up with you. Do you truly think that doing a ritual to force that person to come back to you outside of their own free will is going to fulfill you? Do you believe that? Because if you do, you are very, very shallow, because the part that needs healing, you're ignoring. And you are willing to force another person's free will to make yourself feel better. When somebody asks, a client asks for a love spell, you are essentially asking me to force someone else's free will for your own ends. For me, that means you don't nor have ever truly loved that other person. If you are willing to force the hand of fate and force someone's free will out of their hands to please yourself, to end your own suffering, you're not thinking about the other person. And if you love someone truly, your actions would reflect what that person wants, despite your own pain. Right? The whole idea of the fantasy concept of the man suffering war to get to the love of his life is a metaphor of ego death and spiritual and emotional suffering of not having that person. Because you love them. It's not literal. Unfortunately, most people don't see that. So what we talk about when we talk about results, the consistent results, is the results of self. I think is the most results that we see all the time, right? Is what do we achieve ourselves in the work that we're doing? Do our lives reflect the improvement of self? And LaVey understood this. LaVey talked about, show me your results, right? If you are a powerful magician, show me your results. Your results reflect in your life. They reflect in who you are. Your results aren't necessarily a house, a car, money, a good job, stuff like that. Those aren't inherently the results that we're talking about. We're talking about, what about internally? What about the internal self? Because when the internal self is balanced and integrated, then what happens is the external self begins to thrive, right? If you are resting, putting to rest the internal battles that are inside of yourself, then you are able and capable of pushing forward and reflecting that in the other areas of your life. I do not believe for a second that a well-balanced, humble man is going to be a homeless person. Not because a homeless person is bad or a homeless person, is some negative connotation of being homeless. No. But there's something that happened there where this person no longer cares and is no longer trying at some level, at some point. They're just trying to survive day to day at the very most basic level. Food and shelter, that's it. Right? And shelter, the baseline for what shelter is, lowers. When the internal self is no longer in conflict and you're able to do that, the shadow work and the integration on a constant level, that shows externally. That reflects externally. Not just in what you have, but your own energy, your own charisma, what you put out there, what's coming off of you, right? Many people say it is very easy to be charismatic or to speak what I'm speaking, having what I have. Here's the thing though. I've not always had this, and this is the problem. People don't see what happened, the work that happens before something. I've been homeless 3 fucking times, right? 3 times in 3 different countries. I've been homeless on the streets, like literally, like when I say homeless, I mean literally fucking homeless, right? It's me and my fucking bags. That's it.
but I didn't stop trying. I got up and I moved and I integrated and worked through the shadow aspects of the things that was causing this. And yeah, there are ups and downs. There are pitfalls. There are many times that I fell back into old patterns and almost became homeless again. But it was identifying those patterns, identifying what was causing those patterns, identifying why I was there, and moving outside of that. Right? So, yeah. You know, it's those are your results, right? That's the results we're talking about. Now, does the force amplify your sovereignty or drain it? You need to pay attention to that. The entities that you're working with, are you being amplified or are you being drained? Because if you're being drained, you shouldn't be in your pantheon. Does it integrate with your existing system or conflict with it? This kind of has a balance aspect to it, right? Because there are certain moments where conflict in your pantheon is necessary. If there needs to be a dramatic change, maybe that conflict is necessary, but that presents itself in a very specific way. This here, we're talking about your existing system. If your existing system aligns with your goals, is consistent with your results, and amplifies your sovereignty, then there really isn't a necessity to change it. So if something you bring in conflicts with that, then it shouldn't be there. Practical criteria: purpose alignment, shadow work, protection, rebellion, knowledge, emotional, intuitive responses, past life or symbolism in your personal narrative, how they influence your rituals and dreams, whether they challenge you or pacify you. You need to be challenged. Your pantheon needs to challenge you, not pacify you. If you're not being challenged, if you're being agreed with all the time, then you're honestly, you're doing it wrong. You are, right? Your pantheon should never be a comfort blanket. Every member should push you. If the entity makes you sharper, clearer, more capable, to keep her. If the entity only gives you excuses, that's a parasite in a pretty mask. Trickster, right? What we call a trickster demon. Pretending to be that thing that you want to work with. Now, structure, hierarchy, and ritual integration. Central deity or force, so Lucifer, Baphomet, Hecate, Odin. Functional roles: guardian, teacher, destroyer, transformer, muse. Seasonal or cyclical roles, right? Entities that govern specific phases. Inner court versus outer court. Primary versus secondary working spirits, right? So right now I'm still on my inner court. I don't have an outer court. I don't have that many. But for those that want to work with quite a few, like you can have like your inner circle and your outer circle, right? Your primary and your secondary working spirits. Dedicated altars or altar zones, right? So consider going in and having multiple altars. It does help. I have one. I don't have the space for multiple. I don't have a full fucking temple. Rotational devotional cycles. So with the ritual flags that Dyer and I developed and have on her store. Hold on a second, everybody. Okay, so okay, so the rotational devotional cycles with those flags. So I have the sigil of Baphomet as the primary sigil on my wall. So if I don't have a flag up, that's what's up. But then the flags, like depending on what I want to focus on, if I want to focus on something specific, I will put one of the ritual flags up, and that gives me a focal point, right? In that, in that ritual. Sigils assigned to each role: dream work, meditation mask, pantheon councils, inner gnosis sessions. Hierarchy is not about kneeling. It's about organizing your spiritual command structure. You can't build a kingdom with no chain of command. And this is so important. This is something that so many people miss, right? Is that they do this stuff so haphazardly. And it's just like there's so much that I think people need to do organizationally when they're doing this, that, you know, they just don't. And I think it leads to limited results, limited consistency, lack of desire to move forward with things, right? So building your own personal pantheon requires that. I think it requires and it needs that structure, right? So ethics, adaptation, and evolution. Pantheons evolve as you evolve. Removing an entity is not betrayal. It is clarity. Unless you've made a pact, be careful with that. Adding new forces must be deliberate, right? When you add something new, it needs to be deliberate and there needs to be a reason to it. Practitioners must review pantheons annually. I think that everyone doing, like, I think honestly, as practitioners, active practitioners, if you're theistic, I think you should do like an annual review of like what's in your pantheon, right? And switch it up, move it around, figure out some new shit, right? Personal gnosis must stay grounded in results and not fantasy. Your gnosis must you need to focus on reality. Not what you want to be true, but what is true. A pantheon is a living organism, and you are its nucleus. When you grow, it changes. When you collapse, it shifts. When you rise again, it transforms. This is the natural movement of. Anyway, everyone, that is going to conclude today's episode. I hope you guys found it informational, helpful. You know, I thought it was something that kind of needed to be talked about. Not one of my spicier episodes, I know. I apologize. So with that, thank you all for being here. You guys are fucking amazing. And as always, tell thy fucking self. We'll see you in the next one. Peace the fuck out.